Hi everyone, hope you're having a great day. Today, we're diving into a story where one word can shatter a home DNA. A stranger circles like a predator. A father drops a poison seed, and then a message lands. Hanoi confirmed. 2 days. What truth is about to surface? And who's trying to turn it into a weapon if you're into tense, emotional stories with secrets unraveling fast? You're in the right place. And if you enjoy this, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next video. The morning started quiet. Diep was inside making coffee. Outside, Nai was watering the plants with her little watering can, moving slow and careful like she'd been told. Careful mode, Nai announced. Diep smiled from the doorway. Good. Careful mode keeps your clothes dry. The dog was doing its usual patrol around the yard, sniffing at nothing in particular, then settled down next to the lime tree like it was keeping watch. Inside, James was pulling on his jacket when he heard a car. Not loud, no honking, just there. He looked out and saw his father's car parked by the gate. His mother glanced toward the front, but didn't say anything. James stepped outside. "Dad!" His father didn't waste time. He gestured toward the side of the yard where there were a couple of plastic chairs. James went inside, poured water into 2 cups, came back out. "Sit," he said. A few months ago, this wouldn't have worked. Diep would have been around. Nai would have been asking questions. There would have been noise, movement, an excuse to keep things surface level. Now it was just the 2 of them, which was exactly what James didn't want, but also what he knew had to happen eventually. He set the cup down in front of his father and sat. "I want your honest opinion," James said. "No dancing around it. Just say it." Sita, his father looked at the cup of water for a long time. Then he said, "You think Diep is your biological daughter?" James had expected it, but hearing it out loud still felt like a punch. His father's jaw tightened. "I've thought it for a while now." James kept his voice level. "Why?" His father shifted in his chair. He looked older suddenly, tired. "A long time ago, I was involved with her mother. We were young, poor. People didn't approve. It fell apart." He paused. Then time passed. Stories changed. But I never forgot. James stared at him. He didn't know what to feel. Anger, disgust, pity. Maybe all of it at once. "That doesn't make her my daughter," James said carefully. "That's a big leap." His father's eyes sharpened. "You think life doesn't do cruel things?" James leaned forward. "If you're so sure, then prove it. Don't just whisper about it like some ghost story." His father didn't blink. "DNA test." James felt his chest tighten. "No. Why not? If you don't believe me..." "No," James said again, harder this time. He stood up. The chair scraped against the concrete. You're not doing this to protect me," James said, voice low. "You're doing this to push her away, to break us up." His father's face stayed hard. "You're being blind." James shook his head. He could feel the anger building, but he kept it down. "Barely. If you ever cared about me," James said slowly, You don't walk into my life and blow it up. His father leaned back in his chair. His voice went cold. Then bring her home. If she's really family, don't let her live like this. James stopped. That line, it sounded wrong, too smooth, too rehearsed, like his father had been practicing it. James looked at him for a long moment. You don't get to act righteous now, he said quietly. Then he turned and walked back toward the house before his anger could spill over, before it could reach the part of the yard where Nye was still humming softly to herself. At Hill Fruits, the morning felt normal on the surface. Diep checked the cold unit. Luan moved crates around. The checklist on the wall stayed neat and organized, routine. But Diep's instincts were telling her something else. James had been too calm lately. Not peaceful calm. More like the calm before something breaks. And then, right before lunch, Mr. Juan showed up again, smiling, casual, like he was just passing by. I was in the area, he said. Thought I'd check in, see how business is going. Diep didn't smile back. Business is fine. Mr. Juan looked around the shop like he was inspecting it, taking mental notes. You're building a nice life here, he said. Would be a shame if old complications came up. Diep's hands paused, just for a second. Then she kept packing the mangoes like nothing happened. I don't have time for old complications, she said. If you're not buying anything, I need you to move. Mr. Juan chuckled, like she was entertaining him. You're sharp, he said. James chose well. Diep looked up at him, direct, not scared. Leave, she said. She didn't explain, didn't argue. She just took out her phone and called James. Right there, in front of him. James got there fast. He walked into the shop, looked at Mr. Juan, and said one sentence. Don't come here again. Mr. Juan put his hands up like he was innocent. I'm only trying to… No! James cut him off. You're fishing! And you're done, Mr. Juan's smile got thinner. You can't hide things forever, James. James stepped closer. His voice was cold. Watch me, Mr. Juan looked at Diep one more time, like he wanted to see if she was rattled. Then he left. When the door closed, Diep didn't relax. She turned to James. Your father was here this morning, she said quietly. James didn't deny it. Diep's voice stayed calm, but there was an edge to it. And you weren't going to tell me. James tried to keep his tone gentle. It's complicated. Diep shook her head. No, it's my life. Complicated or not, it's still mine. James held her gaze. Then he nodded. Okay, he said. Not here. After dinner. That evening, they didn't go home right away. James suggested the stream field. Diep didn't ask why. She just got the tools from the shed and they walked over. It was getting dark. Not fully dark yet, but that in-between time when you can still see what you're doing, but the colors are starting to fade out. Diep handed him a hoe. We need to raise the beds, she said. For sweet potatoes. James took it. He'd never really done this before. Not properly. He watched her make the first few strokes. then tried to copy. His first swing was too shallow, just scraped the surface. "Deeper," she said, not looking at him. "Like this." He tried again, better this time, but the ridge came out crooked. They worked without talking for a while, just the sound of metal hitting dirt and the stream moving somewhere behind them. After maybe 10 minutes, James stopped. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and let out a breath. "I'm not very good at this." Diep glanced over. "You'll get better." She went back to her bed. Steady, even strokes. She'd done this 1,000 times. James tried to keep going, but his rhythm was off. Stop. Start. Adjust. His mind wasn't really on the potatoes. Finally, he just stopped. Diep noticed. She straightened up and looked at him. "What?" James stuck the hoe in the ground and left it there. "My father came by this morning," he said. Diep didn't move, just waited. "He said something." James paused. "He didn't know how to put this. He has this idea, this theory, I guess, about you." "What kind of theory?" James looked at her. Her face was hard to read in the fading light. "He thinks you might be related to him, by blood." For a second, nothing happened. Diep just stood there with the hoe in her hand, dirt on her knees, staring at him like she was waiting for the rest of the sentence. Then she put the hoe down, carefully, like she needed a second to think. "Related," she said, flat, testing the word. "Yeah." She looked away, toward the stream, or maybe just toward nothing. "So that's why he hates me," she said quietly. It wasn't a question, more like she was saying it out loud to see if it made sense. James stepped closer. "How when we don't know if it's true? He's guessing. He doesn't have proof. But he believes it." "I think so." "Yeah." Diep exhaled through her nose. Not a sigh. Exactly. More like she was letting something go. She didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't even look particularly shocked. She just stood there for a long moment, thinking. Then she said, "Is it true?" James shook his head. "I don't know. I really don't." She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer. "There's something else," James said. Diep looked at him. "I've been trying to find information about your mother." Her face changed, just a little, but he saw it. "And I think she's alive." Diep blinked. Once, twice. Her mouth opened slightly, like she was going to say something, but nothing came out. James waited. "Alive," she repeated. Barely a whisper. "I'm not sure yet. But there's a lead. In Hanoi." Diep sat down. Right there on the dirt between the beds, like her legs just stopped working. James crouched next to her. "I didn't want to say anything until I was sure," he said. "I didn't want to. I don't know. Get your hopes up for nothing." She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at her hands. "How long have you known?" she asked. "A few weeks." She nodded. Didn't seem angry, I'm just processing. They sat there for a while. The insects were starting up their night noise. The stream kept going. Finally, Diep said, "What do we do?" "There's a window in 2 days. To verify." "Verify what?"